Now, I don't want to nitpick every aspect, storyline, or an issue I have for Kenobi, since realistically we would be sitting here forever, and I think there are already hundreds of dedicated videos you can find that already dissects every flaw this series has. My intention is to talk about the show's value in the grand scheme of things, and what context does the series serve in the greater picture of infamous Star Wars franchise. The biggest problem of the show is that its storytelling is heavily compromised by the time frame it is set in, since it cannot afford huge storylines that interfere with the rest of the canon, which renders it quite forgettable and unimportant in the grand scheme of things. But this won't let me be any less critical, since this is a creative decision that could have been avoided, and additionally, somehow, this show still manages to clash with the established story nonetheless. Therefore, we get the story that breaks away from the canon, only to go back to the square one. One of the most interesting things about any story are the character arcs, watching heroes go through life-changing scenarios and come out of them as changed, better people. But the above-mentioned limitations mostly take that option away from Kenobi. Since a trilogy before the show and one right after it perfectly tie into each other, it is highly important for the series that already introduced characters end up in the same exact place and way they're at the beginning of the show. And this is devastating for the story itself because it takes away the ability to have any significant character development. It also messes with ambiguity and unpredictability by completely removing the stakes, since you basically know the ending just by having seen the Skywalker saga.
That was the trickiest thing about this story. You know, not only is it these huge iconic characters and their legacy characters, but we're in between two trilogies. So we're essentially telling the second act of the story, where we know the first act and the third act, and you know what's going to happen to them.
As much as we'd like to think, and as much as the show tries to convince itself that it is a second act to something, this is not how the stories work. This series simply isn't a continuation of the past trilogy, nor it is a prologue to the next one. In terms of storytelling, this show does not work as an act, but more as an intermission. Therefore, you end up with a show that right off the bat cannot physically offer you any significant character arcs, storylines, or stakes, which is worsened by the show's insistence to have as few original characters as possible.